In the heart of Atlanta, tucked away in one of those neighborhoods where big houses stood tall behind iron gates and manicured lawns stretched endlessly, lived a man who had it all except peace of mind. This guy was your classic rags to riches story. He'd started with nothing but grit and determination, building an empire brick by brick until his name became synonymous with success. But there was one thing money couldn't fix: his kids. The twins were 6 years old, full of energy, curiosity, and mischief. They weren't bad kids, they just didn't fit into any mold anyone tried to squeeze them into. The boy was always asking questions, poking at things, taking apart gadgets to see how they worked. His sister? She was sharp-witted, bold, and unafraid to speak her mind. Together, they turned every classroom upside down without even trying. Their dad did everything he could think of to give them the best education possible. Private schools? Check. Tutors? Double check. Special programs designed for gifted children? You bet. But no matter what he did, teachers threw up their hands in frustration after a few months. Some quit outright. Others sent long emails about behavioral challenges or difficulty managing their unique personalities. It got to the point where the mere mention of the twins' names made educators cringe. One evening, sitting alone in his study with papers scattered across his desk, the father sighed deeply. Another teacher had walked out that day, leaving him feeling like he'd hit rock bottom. How could someone so successful feel so helpless when it came to his own children? Wasn't sending them to the best schools supposed to solve these problems? As he was about to call yet another school to beg for recommendations, his phone buzzed. It was the principal of the latest private academy the twins attended. "I want you to meet someone," the principal said. There was something in her voice, a mix of hope and confidence, that caught his attention. Normally, he'd brush off such calls, expecting another round of disappointment. But this time, he agreed to come in. The next morning, he found himself face to face with a woman unlike anyone he'd met before. She wasn't flashy or overly formal. In fact, she carried herself with quiet strength, wearing a warm smile that immediately put people at ease. Her name wasn't important here. What mattered was the way she spoke. When she looked at him, he felt seen in a way he hadn't in years. "I've read through the reports," she began, flipping through some files on the table between them. "And I have to say, I don't see problems. I see potential." Those words stopped him cold. Potential? No one had ever used that word to describe his kids in this context. Most people saw chaos, disruption, headaches. But not her. She leaned forward slightly, her tone firm yet kind. "These children aren't difficult because they're broken. They're difficult because they're bored. Because they're smart. Because they need someone who can keep up with them instead of trying to slow them down." For the first time in forever, the father felt a spark of hope ignite inside him. Maybe this wasn't hopeless after all. Maybe there was someone out there who could actually understand his kids, not just tolerate them, but truly connect with them. Over the next hour, they talked about everything. The boy's endless fascination with machines, the girl's love for stories and art, the late nights spent wondering if he was doing enough as a parent. She listened intently, nodding occasionally, asking thoughtful questions that showed she genuinely cared. By the end of the meeting, he knew two things for sure. First, this woman was different. Second, she might just be the answer to prayers. He hadn't realized he'd been praying as they wrapped up the conversation. She gave him a reassuring smile. "Let's try something new," she suggested. "Something tailored to who they are, not who we expect them to be." And just like that, a partnership was born, one that would change not only the lives of the twins, but also the entire family. Little did they know, this decision wouldn't just transform their world. It would ripple outward, touching countless others along the way. but that's a story for another time. For now, the journey was just beginning, and already it promised to be unforgettable. The very next day, the woman walked into the twins' classroom like she owned the place, not in an arrogant way, but with a quiet confidence that said, "I've got this." The kids, of course, didn't know what to make of her. She wasn't like the other teachers who came in armed with stern looks and rigid rules. Instead, she carried a notebook, a warm smile, and an energy that seemed to match theirs. For the first week, she didn't dive straight into lesson plans or demand order. Instead, she watched. She observed how the boy would sneak off during group activities to tinker with the pencil sharpener, trying to figure out how it worked. She noticed how the girl would doodle elaborate stories in the margins of her worksheets, ignoring the actual questions entirely. She saw the way they lit up when something interested them, and how quickly they shut down when things felt repetitive or boring. By the end of that week, she called the father for a meeting. "I think I understand them better now," she said, laying out her observations. "Your son isn't just curious, he's hungry to learn how things work. Your daughter isn't disruptive, she's creative, and she needs space to express herself. They're not problems. They're opportunities." Her words hit home. No one had ever framed his kids' quirks as strengths before. Most people saw their behavior as something to be fixed, not nurtured. But here was someone who looked at them and saw possibilities instead of obstacles. With that understanding, she rolled up her sleeves and got to work. For the boy, she introduced hands-on projects that tapped into his love for figuring things out. One afternoon, she brought in a small, broken clock and placed it on his desk. "Think you can fix this?" she asked casually, like it was no big deal. His eyes widened with excitement, and he immediately went to work, carefully dismantling the pieces, examining each gear, and putting it back together. When the clock ticked again, his face glowed with pride. She didn't stop there. Knowing his interest in science, she reached out to local tech companies and arranged for him to visit their labs once a month. There, he met engineers and inventors who showed him real-world applications of the concepts he loved. These experiences weren't just fun, they gave him a sense of purpose. For the first time, he realized his curiosity wasn't a nuisance. It was a gift. As for the girl, the teacher knew she needed a different approach. Writing endless sentences about topics she didn't care about wasn't going to cut it. So she proposed an idea, a classroom newspaper. Every week, the girl could write articles, design layouts, and even interview classmates for stories. At first, the girl hesitated. "What if I mess it up?" she asked, biting her lip. The teacher simply smiled and replied, "Messing up is part of creating something." "Great. Let's start small and see where it takes us." And so, the newspaper came to life. The girl poured her heart into it, crafting tales about school events, funny anecdotes, and even opinion pieces about why recess should be longer. Her confidence grew with every issue, and soon other students started contributing too. What began as a solo project turned into a collaborative effort, with the girl leading the charge. She discovered leadership skills she didn't know she had, and her classmates began to admire her creativity and determination. But the teacher didn't stop at academics. She understood that the twins' struggles weren't just about learning styles, they were emotional too. Both kids missed their mom deeply, though they rarely talked about it. Their dad worked long hours, leaving them to navigate their feelings on their own. Sensing this void, the teacher gently encouraged the father to get more involved in their education. "Why don't you join us for our next field trip?" she suggested during one of their meetings. "Or maybe help your daughter brainstorm ideas for her next article? You'd be surprised how much it means to them." At first, the father hesitated. He wasn't used to being so hands-on. Running a business empire left little room for anything else. But deep down, he knew she was right. So he started showing up reading drafts of the newspaper, cheering at science fairs, and even joining family outings tied to their lessons. Slowly but surely, the gap between them began to close. The twins weren't the only ones changing. Though, the father found himself looking forward to these moments, realizing how much he'd been missing. Watching his son explain the mechanics of a toy car or hearing his daughter read aloud from her latest article filled him with a kind of joy he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just about fixing their behavior anymore, it was about reconnecting as a family. Of course, not everything went smoothly. There were still days when the boy accidentally broke something important during one of his experiments, or when the girl got frustrated and crumpled up her paper in a fit of perfectionism. But instead of punishing them, the teacher approached these moments as opportunities to teach resilience. "Mistakes happen," she'd say calmly. "What matters is what we do next." Her patience and consistency started to rub off on the twins. They began to trust her, knowing she wouldn't give up on them no matter how messy things got. And as that trust grew, so did their willingness to try new things. The classroom transformed from a battleground into a place of discovery, laughter, and growth. Meanwhile, the father couldn't help but marvel at the difference. For years, he'd felt like he was failing as a parent, unable to provide the stability his kids needed. Now, thanks to this remarkable woman, he saw glimpses of the family they could become. He often thanked her, but she always brushed it off with a humble smile. "I'm just doing my job," she'd say. Yet, everyone around her knew she was doing far more than that. By the end of the semester, the transformation was undeniable. The twins were thriving, their dad was more present, and the classroom buzzed with a newfound energy. Word spread among parents and teachers about the incredible progress the twins had made. Some were skeptical, wondering if such success could last. Others whispered about the methods being too unconventional. But none of that mattered to the family. They had found something rare and precious, a partnership built on understanding, patience, and belief in each other. What happened next would test that partnership in ways no one expected. But for now, life felt lighter, brighter, and full of promise. The journey was far from over, but the foundation had been laid, and it was stronger than anyone could have imagined. As the twins continued to thrive under their teacher's guidance, not everyone was thrilled about the changes. Word spread quickly among the other parents at the school, some with admiration, others with suspicion. Whispers filled the hallways. During drop-off and pickup times, "Did you hear about those two?" One mom murmured to another while sipping her coffee. "They're getting all this special attention. Why should they get treated differently just because their dad has money?" Others chimed in, voicing their concerns more loudly. "It's not fair," a father grumbled at a PTA meeting. "Our kids don't get custom lesson plans or private science labs. Are we supposed to believe this is really about education, or is it just favoritism?" The complaints grew louder as the twins' achievements became harder to ignore. Their projects were showcased at school events, their names mentioned in newsletters, and their progress celebrated by teachers and administrators alike. The tension reached a boiling point when the boy won second place in a regional science fair, a competition that drew participants from some of the best schools in the state. His invention, a small but clever device designed to conserve water, earned praise from judges and applause from the audience. But instead of celebrating his success, a few parents accused the teacher of playing favorites. "Of course he won," one muttered bitterly. "Who else gets access to tech company resources and personalized coaching?" Even the girl faced criticism. Her classroom newspaper had gained popularity, with students eagerly awaiting each new issue. Some parents dismissed it as frivolous, claiming it took away from real learning. Others argued that giving her so much creative freedom set unrealistic expectations for other children. What happens when they leave this school? One parent asked pointedly during a heated discussion. Will they be able to handle normal classrooms after all this pampering? The backlash weighed heavily on the teacher. She'd always known that challenging traditional methods would invite resistance, but hearing these accusations stung. Still, she refused to let negativity derail her mission. During a particularly tense staff meeting, she stood up and addressed the room with quiet conviction. Every child deserves to learn in a way that works for them, she said firmly. Yes, I've tailored my approach to meet the needs of these students. But isn't that what teaching is supposed to be about? Meeting kids where they are and helping them grow? Her words resonated with some, but not everyone was convinced. Even the father found himself questioning whether relying so heavily on her methods might backfire in the long run. Late at night, sitting alone in his study, he wrestled with doubts. Was he setting his kids up for failure by encouraging such individualized attention? Would they struggle to adapt once they moved on to bigger, less flexible environments? The turning point came unexpectedly during a school assembly. The principal had invited several students to share presentations about their recent accomplishments, and both twins were chosen to participate. The boy went first, nervously stepping onto the stage with his water conservation device in hand. As he explained how it worked and why he'd created it, the audience listened intently. When he finished, the room erupted into applause, not polite claps, but genuine cheers that echoed through the auditorium. Then it was the girl's turn. Holding a copy of her latest newspaper issue, she began speaking softly, almost shyly. But as she shared snippets from her articles and talked about the joy of storytelling, her voice grew stronger. By the time she reached the end of her speech, tears glistened in her eyes and in the eyes of many parents watching from the crowd. I used to think I wasn't good enough, she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. But Ms. Teacher taught me that my ideas matter, that I matter, and now I want to show everyone else that they matter too. The room fell silent for a moment before erupting into thunderous applause. Parents who had criticized her work just weeks earlier wiped away tears, moved by her honesty and courage. For the first time, they saw the twins not as entitled beneficiaries of privilege, but as kids who had overcome real struggles to find their voices. Later that evening, the father received an email from a fellow parent he barely knew. I owe you an apology, it read. Today, your daughter reminded me of something I'd forgotten. Every child deserves to feel seen and valued. Thank you for sharing your family's journey with us. That same week, the boys' science project caught the attention of a local news station which ran a feature on young innovators in the community. Watching him explain his invention on TV, calm and confident, made the father realize how far his son had come. Gone was the frustrated child who once dismantled classroom equipment out of boredom. In his place stood a budding engineer with dreams bigger than anyone could have imagined. Amidst the accolades and newfound respect, however, the teacher faced a personal dilemma. Offers began pouring in from prestigious schools wanting to recruit her, educational organizations seeking her expertise, and even corporate sponsors eager to fund her initiatives. Each proposal came with promises of higher pay, greater recognition, and opportunities to expand her impact beyond a single classroom. She wrestled with the decision privately, torn between ambition and loyalty. On one hand, leaving meant stepping onto a larger platform where she could influence systemic change. On the other hand, staying meant continuing to pour her heart into the twins and the rest of her students, nurturing their growth day by day. It was a choice that kept her awake at night, replaying conversations and weighing possibilities. One afternoon, she sat down with the father to discuss her options. I need your perspective, she confessed, her usual composure cracking slightly. If I stay, I can keep guiding your kids through this pivotal time. If I go, I can help create programs that benefit countless others like them. Which path do you think I should take?" The father hesitated, surprised by the weight of her question. After a long pause, he replied honestly, "You've already changed our lives in ways I never thought possible. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. Just promise me one thing: don't lose sight of why you started doing this in the first place." Her eyes softened, and she nodded. "Thank you," she whispered. "That's exactly what I needed to hear." In the end, her decision wouldn't just shape her future, it would ripple outward, touching lives far beyond the walls of the school. But for now, the focus remained on the present: a family rediscovering hope, a teacher grappling with purpose, and two extraordinary kids proving that every challenge has a silver lining if you're willing to look for it. The teacher's decision to stay didn't come easily. It wasn't just about loyalty or the bond she'd formed with the twins. It was about something deeper. She saw in them a reflection of her own childhood, growing up in a neighborhood where resources were scarce and opportunities even scarcer. Her teachers back then hadn't always understood her either. She remembered the frustration of being told to sit still when all she wanted to do was ask questions, or being handed worksheets that felt meaningless because they didn't challenge her mind. But there had been one teacher, a woman who looked like her, talked like her, and seemed to understand her struggles without needing explanations, who changed everything. That teacher had taken time to nurture her curiosity, pushing her to dream bigger than her circumstances allowed. Now, standing in front of the twins and their classmates, she realized she had the chance to be that same kind of lifeline for someone else. Her commitment to staying went beyond just teaching the twins. It became a mission to inspire change within the entire school community. She started small, organizing workshops for other teachers on how to identify and support gifted but unconventional learners. At first, attendance was low. Many educators dismissed the sessions as unnecessary or too idealistic. But slowly, word spread about the results she was achieving in her classroom. Parents noticed improvements not just in the twins, but in other students she worked with indirectly. Soon, more teachers began showing up, eager to learn from her methods. One of the biggest breakthroughs came when she introduced a mentorship program pairing older students with younger ones. The idea was simple: older kids could help guide their peers while also reinforcing their own skills. The boy, now confident in his abilities, volunteered to mentor a group of fourth graders interested in science. He showed them how to build simple circuits and encouraged them to think creatively about solving problems. Watching him teach others brought tears to his dad's eyes. It was proof that his son wasn't just excelling academically. He was becoming a leader. The girl, meanwhile, took her newspaper project to the next level. With her teacher's encouragement, she expanded it into a school-wide initiative called Young Voices. Students from different grades submitted stories, poems, and artwork, giving everyone a platform to express themselves. The first edition was modest, printed on plain paper stapled together. But by the third issue, it had grown into a polished publication complete with colorful illustrations and thoughtful articles. Parents who once criticized the project now eagerly flipped through its pages, marveling at the talent shining through Dot. As the twins flourished, so did their relationship with their father. He made a conscious effort to be more present, carving out time each week to engage with their projects and passions. On weekends, they visited museums, libraries, and parks, turning learning into an adventure. During one particularly memorable outing, the family attended a robotics exhibit where the boy got to meet engineers working on cutting-edge technology. As he peppered them with questions, his dad stood back, watching with pride. For the first time in years, he felt truly connected to his children, not just as their provider, but as their partner in discovery, but the teacher's influence extended far beyond academics and family dynamics. Inspired by her dedication, the father began thinking about ways he could give back to the broader community. He realized that while his wealth gave him access to elite schools and resources, most families didn't have those luxuries. So, he decided to use his success to create opportunities for others. He started by funding scholarships for underprivileged students to attend high-quality schools. Then, he partnered with local organizations to provide training programs for minority educators, ensuring that more classrooms would benefit from teachers who understood diverse perspectives. His efforts weren't flashy or self-promotional. They were practical steps aimed at leveling the playing field. At one point, he sat down with the teacher to discuss his plans. "You've shown me what real leadership looks like," he admitted. "It's not about power or control. It's about lifting others up. I want to carry that forward." She smiled, touched by his words. "That's exactly why I stayed," she said, "because change doesn't happen in isolation. It takes people coming together to build something better." The twins played a role in this transformation too. Encouraged by their teacher, they organized fundraisers for local charities and volunteered at community centers. The boy used his love for science to host workshops for younger kids, teaching them basic engineering concepts through fun experiments. The girl wrote articles highlighting issues affecting their neighborhood, using her voice to bring attention to causes she cared about. Together, they became ambassadors for the values their teacher had instilled in them: empathy, resilience, and a belief in the power of education to transform lives. Of course, challenges remained. Some teachers still resisted adopting new approaches, clinging to outdated methods that prioritized conformity over creativity. Others questioned whether the changes happening in the school were sustainable. And there were moments when the father, worried that his efforts might not make enough of a difference in the grand scheme of things. But every time doubt crept in, he reminded himself of the progress he'd already witnessed, not just in his own kids, but in the wider community. By the end of the school year, the impact was undeniable. Test scores improved across the board. Discipline issues decreased and parent satisfaction soared. What had once been a source of tension among families became a model for collaboration and growth. Even critics who had initially opposed the teacher's methods softened their stance, acknowledging the positive shifts they saw in their own children. Yet, despite all the success, the teacher remained humble. When praised for her work, she often redirected the credit to her students. "They're the ones doing the hard work," she'd say with a smile. "I'm just here to guide them." As summer approached, the twins prepared for the next chapter of their journey. They were moving on to middle school, leaving behind the classroom where so much magic had happened. Saying goodbye wasn't easy for them, for their dad, or for the teacher who had become such a vital part of their lives. But as they stood together on the last day of school, sharing hugs and promises to stay in touch, it was clear that the bonds they'd formed would endure long after the final bell rang. What lay ahead was uncertain, but one thing was sure: the lessons they'd learned, from resilience to compassion to the importance of believing in oneself, would stay with them forever. And as the teacher watched them walk away, hand in hand with their dad, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Her job wasn't done, not by a long shot, but knowing she'd made a lasting impact gave her the strength to keep going. Little did anyone know, the seeds planted during this transformative year would continue to grow, shaping not only the twins' futures, but also the lives of countless others who followed in their footsteps. Years passed, and the twins grew into young adults who carried the lessons of their childhood with them wherever they went. The boy, now a teenager, had turned his love for tinkering into a passion for engineering. He spent countless hours in high school robotics clubs, designing machines that solved real-world problems. His projects earned him recognition at national competitions, But what mattered most to him was the impact he could make. Inspired by the mentorship program his teacher had started years ago, he began volunteering at local youth centers, teaching kids how to build simple robots and encouraging them to dream big. The girl, on the other hand, had blossomed into a confident writer and advocate. Her newspaper, Young Voices, had evolved into an online platform that gave a voice to underrepresented students across the city. Through essays, interviews, and opinion pieces, she tackled issues like inequality, mental health, and environmental sustainability. Her words resonated with readers, young and old alike, and soon, she was invited to speak at conferences and community events. Yet despite her growing fame, she remained grounded, always crediting her teacher for showing her the power of storytelling. Father watched these transformations with pride, though he often reflected on how close he'd come to losing hope. Those early days of frustration and self-doubt felt like a lifetime ago now. Instead of focusing solely on business, he had become a champion for educational equity. His foundation funded scholarships, supported minority educators, and provided resources for schools in underserved areas. He even partnered with tech companies to create internship programs for students interested in STEM fields. Every project he launched was guided by one goal: ensuring that every child, no matter their background, had access to opportunities like the ones his kids had received. But perhaps the most profound legacy belonged to the teacher herself. Though she stayed at the same school year after year, her influence reached far beyond its walls. The workshops she led inspired teachers nationwide to rethink their approaches, emphasizing creativity and individuality over rigid standards. Her mentorship program became a model replicated in schools across the country, connecting older students with younger ones and fostering a sense of community. And her advocacy for minority educators sparked conversations about representation and inclusion in classrooms, conversations about representation and inclusion in classrooms, inclusion in classrooms, movement that gained momentum as more people joined the cause. Still, she never sought the spotlight. When reporters asked to interview her or organizations offered awards, she politely declined, saying simply, "This isn't about me, it's about the kids." To her, success wasn't measured in headlines or accolades. It was measured in the smiles of students who finally felt seen, the confidence of parents who believed in brighter futures, and the gratitude of colleagues who learned to see teaching as an art rather than a job. One evening, during a rare quiet moment, the father sat down with her over coffee to thank her once again. "You changed everything," he said earnestly. "Not just for my kids, but for me too. I don't know if I ever told you how much your belief in us meant." She chuckled softly, waving off his praise. "I didn't do anything special," she replied. "You were already doing the hard work. I just helped you see it differently." Her humility struck him, as it always did. But deep down, he knew better. She hadn't just taught his children academics. She'd taught them and him how to navigate life with purpose and heart. Without her, none of this would have been possible. As the twins approached graduation, the family decided to honor the teacher in a way that truly reflected her impact. They organized a small ceremony at the school, inviting former students, colleagues, and friends to celebrate her contributions. On the day of the event, the room buzzed with energy. Former students shared stories of how she believed in them when no one else did. Colleagues spoke of her unwavering dedication and innovative spirit. Even parents who had once doubted her methods stood up to express their gratitude. When it was the twins' turn to speak, the boy stepped forward first. Holding back tears, he said, "She taught me that being curious isn't something to be ashamed of, it's something to be proud of. Because of her, I know I can solve any problem if I put my mind to it." Then the girl took the stage, clutching a handwritten note. She showed me that my voice matters, she began, her voice trembling slightly. That writing isn't just about words on a page, it's about making people feel seen and heard. And because of her, I've learned to use my voice not just for myself, but for others. Finally, the father rose to present her with a plaque engraved with a simple message, asterisk, for seeing potential where others saw problems and changing lives forever. As she accepted it, her eyes glistened with emotion, though she maintained her signature composure. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the applause. Afterward, as the crowd dispersed and the room emptied, the teacher lingered behind, gazing at the plaque thoughtfully. She didn't need awards or ceremonies to validate her work. Her reward was in the lives she'd touched. Yet, in that moment, she allowed herself to feel proud. Proud of the twins who had grown into remarkable individuals. Proud of the father who had embraced vulnerability and growth. Proud of the ripples of change spreading outward, touching communities she might never meet. In the years that followed, the twins continued to carry her lessons with them. The boy pursued a degree in mechanical engineering, eventually founding a nonprofit that brought affordable technology to developing countries. The girl became a journalist, using her platform to amplify marginalized voices and challenge systemic injustices. Their paths diverged, but their shared foundation kept them connected, a bond forged by a teacher who refused to give up on them. And as for the teacher, she kept teaching year after year until retirement finally called. By then, her methods had transformed not only her classroom but also the broader landscape of education. Schools adopted her strategies, policymakers listened to her insights, and generations of students benefited from her vision. Though she eventually left the classroom, her legacy endured in the lives she'd changed, the systems she'd improved, and the countless stories of resilience and hope she'd inspired. Looking back, the father often marveled at how one decision had set everything in motion. Hiring that teacher hadn't just saved his children, it had saved him. It had reminded him that success isn't measured in wealth or titles, but in the connections we forge and the lives we uplift. Together they had proven that even the toughest puzzles could be solved with patience, understanding, and a little faith. And so, the story came full circle, not with fanfare or dramatic endings, but with quiet triumphs and enduring legacies. A teacher, a father, and two extraordinary kids had shown the world what was possible when people dared to believe in each other. Their journey was proof that change starts small, with a single act of courage, compassion, and trust. And sometimes, that's all it takes to rewrite the future.